Okay.
Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. Welcome to my channel. I'm so happy to do another interview. It has been a while, and I'm here with Louisa Peck to talk about near-death experiences and after effects and a whole lot more. But please check out the links below on this video to learn more about her and to check out some of my offers. I really love contacting people and connecting with them. So I'd love to connect with you. And also, I'd love it if you ordered the Audible version of my book because it's fun to connect with those who enjoy Audible. But hi, Louisa, and welcome to my show.
Hi. So I'm on now.
You are, yes, yes. And
Okay, all
I,
right.
I love to begin by just letting you talk about who were you before your near-death experience briefly, and then how did you die?
Okay. And I just want to spill the beans. So Tricia and I are friends that we've met at ION's conferences. And so I think we both feel really excited to do this interview because we're comfortable. And I'd also like to say that I might sneeze because I kind of feel like I need to, but maybe that'll go away. Who I was before my near-death experience. I grew up in an alcoholic home, and some people come out of that scot-free and other people don't. I came out of it with a lot of insecurities, and so I compensated for that by achieving a lot in terms of academia and being vain. And to say it in a quick way, right? So I had finished college, so all I had left really was being vain. So I was going to nightclubs a lot and trying to feel like I mattered because I could attract attention or whatever. So on this particular night, I went to a nightclub with a friend who was also a cocaine dealer, and we did all the cocaine that he had. And I'm just thinking I was looking at the wrong thing. Anyway, when that was gone, I wanted more because I was feeling like I was dancing. We were at this really cool club that I thought was the coolest club I'd ever been to in Manhattan. And I felt like if there was ever a night that I could really feel okay, this is it, right? And so we just started asking around, anybody got cocaine? Anybody got cocaine? We got led to this guy. It was just a shady looking guy. He reminded me of the kind of scrawny guy that's in Saturday Night Fever, if you can think of that character. And he said, yeah, I got some stuff. I got some good stuff. And so he sold us, I think, a gram, but I can't, it was with half gram or gram. I don't know. It was $50 worth in the club. And so we started doing it. My friend said, this is doing nothing for me. And I, being a good alcoholic addict, thought, well, maybe if I do the whole thing, I'll get something from it. So I did the whole thing. And it did nothing in terms of a high. But I later learned that it was lidocaine, not cocaine. It had numbed our gums when we put them on to test. So it was some kind of anesthetic. But the fact that it gave no high, and I later ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous with a lot of dealer friends who said in the 80s, we cut cocaine with lidocaine and someone sold you pure lidocaine. So I am 90% sure, 99% sure that's what it was. So what it does is shut down all your automatic nervous system. My heart was slowing down. My breathing was slowing down.
Was this at the club or did you go home?
At the club. No, this
Wow.
was at the club. I remember being in the bathroom in line for the toilet and just thinking, wow, I'm getting tunnel vision, and what a cool side effect that is. That I was dying didn't occur to me. And I was so happy that for once I felt cooler than everybody else in the bathroom. But then when I got in the stall, I could not read any of the graffiti. And I knew some of this is in English, and what's wrong with my brain that I can't read it. That was the first time I started to feel alarmed. Then I began to feel there was no air in the club. And I went back to my friend and said, there's no air down here. There's no air. I was, by that time, breathing as deeply as I could because I think my breaths had shrunk. But once I got panicked, I started to breathe hard. But my heart was going so slowly that it wouldn't get to my brain. So on the outside, I had a grand mal seizure. I guess I fell back from the bar onto the floor in the nightclub and did this whole thing. Later, I had bruises all over my head, all over my hands, all over the back, everything from doing that. And the bartender began to do CPR. But I knew none of this. I had what's called an amnesiatic NDE. I'd never heard that term before. I think even Alexander used it at our last conference, and I was like, oh, that's what you call mine, because I did not see my body on the nightclub floor. I had one moment, I felt like I had hit my chin on the bar, and that it had worked like a Popeye punch to shoot me straight up in the air, which made, to me, perfect sense. I was excited that I was shooting straight up, and I had a very brief moment of the sense of leaving the nightclub. And can you use swear words at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Leaving all that bullshit below me was the feeling I had. And then I went up into this pure blue sky, and I was just filled with euphoria. And I did have a sense of me as myself, but I forgot all about kind of the job of being Louisa in the world. Like that whole thing had been left with the bullshit down there. Now
I have to ask a question, because it's such a beautiful part of your story. But this moment where you shot up, I've often thought this, and I wanted to talk openly with someone who will talk about drugs and alcohol, but I've thought that many addicts and alcoholics are longing for God, are longing for that release. And it's the greatest high, that you could possibly have in that moment, to just leave all this behind and be in that light. And so do you feel like that was kind of like, oh, finally, I understand?
Well, I hadn't really gotten to the light. I was just out of my body, but even that was such a relief, I mean, I will get to the light later in my story, but this was just, I was in some kind of landscape, symbolic landscape, in some in-between world. But I definitely do think that the light, the real light, is what people are seeking when they do, particularly, the drugs, that heroin and others that act as endorphins rather than as dopamine.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had this feeling that I could do a back bend and a back dive. And so I thought, I'm going to do a reverse swan dive because I can do stuff. That's the feeling I had, I was really like a little kid, excited. So I bent over backwards. It worked perfectly. I did this backwards swan dive. And then I see that the ocean is under me. And I have a brief thought like, oh, isn't it like concrete when you hit the ocean and you're moving really, really fast? And instead of fear, I just had, well, we'll find out. There's no fear. And so I hit it and it went okay. And I went way down deep under the water. Could see that beautiful, you see it sometimes in underwater scuba diving movies where the bubbles are going up around you. I saw the surface way up there. And I had another little thought like, wow, the surface is way up there. I wonder if I can get there okay. And again, then I'm there right away and it's no problem. Then I see the shore. And I wish I could say it was a beautiful tropical shore, but it was not. It was kind of I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and it was kind of a Pacific Northwest beach, meaning a lot of barnacles and a lot of seaweed, and it's not like gorgeous like that. But I thought, oh, I want to be there. So the next thing I know, I was wading out of the water, and I turned along the beach and I saw a house up on a mesa. It was as if the ocean had eroded away and left this kind of sea stack with a house on it. And so I thought, oh, I want to be there. And so then I'm there. And my feeling is like, wow, cool, with everything. Wow, cool. Like that was the kind of the full extent of my emotional vocabulary. And I sometimes think that that's how it feels to be an angel too, that they can't feel any of our like, oh, woe is me stuff, because they live in this world where it's all good. And so one thing though was that the mesa now was kind of a pile of boulders, and they were covered with this really gross slime. It was like rotten seaweed was what I thought. And to get to the doorway of this house, I had to climb through it. But I had this, again, same sense as with the swan dive. I can do this. I can do stuff. And so I climbed beyond it. Once I got above it to the doorway, I had lost my body. So a lot of people talk about that there's some gross stuff we carry with us, this purging that has to happen, that you shed your anger, your fear, your all of these darker emotions. To me, I feel like the sludge was that stuff. I didn't know at the time, though. I didn't know anything about NDEs at all. So I just thought, phew, that's over with. But
did you feel like you were a ball of light after that? Or did you just feel like
it's high off the ground? And the best I can compare it to, I had no body, but I was a little bit Alice in Wonderland and a little bit Snake. Okay, so I'm kind of like a slightly bummed that I don't have a higher perspective, but I can go over the door sill into the house, and so I'm like, hey, good enough, good enough. And I'm very low along the ground, so much so that I saw the floorboards in tremendous detail. They were very worn. It was very old. Many people had walked there, and I knew it was my ancestors who had worn this these floorboards down. Now, in real life, the twerpy vain girl who's back in the New York nightclub did not give a crap about her ancestry, never thought about her ancestors. The spirit that entered this house was thrilled, like, we all go here, and now it's my turn, and I'm so excited to join the rest of us. And I had the feeling of us. So I also sensed my grandfather. Now, he is the only one who I never got to meet. So I had several grandparents who had died, but I didn't sense them so much as him. I sensed his joy that we would finally get to meet.
Interesting.
Who was he to me? A picture in my dad's closet, you know, but I felt all this joy at the prospect of meeting him. So there was supposed to be a chair in the middle of this room that looked out at the water. I knew there was supposed to be an armchair, and I knew that my ancestors all loved to sit in it and look at the view. And the sun had started setting. I wanted the chair, but it wasn't there. But as soon as I said, oh, I wish I could see the sunset, then I started getting pulled along the floor. And even though I didn't have a body, it felt that I was pulled by my heart towards the windowsill, and then up, and I'm thinking, wow. And then over the windowsill, and I started flying across the water, across the path of light that the sun made across the water. And I was flying toward the sun. And this is sometimes little bits of my life would come back to me, and I would think, hey, wait a minute. People can't fly. This this must be, is this a dream? Is this real? That's what I thought. And then something answered me, more real than anything you've ever known or done. And so I was kind of like, okay. And I was heading toward the sun. And then I had a thought, it's getting bigger and bigger. I'm going to hit it. Again, without fear, just we'll see what happens. And then I hit the sun and passed through a sort of a filament, and I was in the core of it. Now, knowing what I know now about NDE symbolism, this is so beautiful, because I was an atheist and I rejected and really despised everything about the church and everything I'd heard about God. But when a human being sees a sunset, we all get a feeling of awe. And so that's why my higher power led me along that path. I felt awe towards the beauty of the sun. And also my father had taught me that the sun was the giver of life. So if you were to have a physical representation of the source of me, the source of life, it would be the sun.
Beautiful, beautiful. So this idea of, did you feel like it was God, the light, or did you just feel like it was awe?
I felt like it was goodness, and because I didn't believe in God, you know, so I couldn't really think, oh, it's God, because So when I went into the sun, then I was in the light for real. And I was permeated with that joy and that bliss and that love beyond measure. And I was starving for it. And I remember having the feeling like, finally, you know?
Yeah, no, I relate to that. Like, finally, I know what love is.
Yeah, and finally I'm complete and I want for nothing, you know? It's just this complete bliss. And then I had the sense almost instantly, I can't really say and then, but almost instantly, that I was being held the way a baby is held by a parent. I couldn't see anything because all I saw was the light, but you can know things without seeing them visually. And I knew that the parent was embracing me, and I knew that the parent was pouring this love into me. You are so loved. You are so, and it was not like, oh, we do this for everybody.
It was special, yes.
It was me that they loved. It was I that they loved, you know, and and it's as though someone knows you better than anyone in your life and better even than you know yourself. And they just adore you. So I was ready to just hang out there forever. I was so complete and happy, and I loved the parent too. That's one thing I can say, I had love back. And all of a sudden, apropos of nothing, the parent says, you can't stay, you're not done yet. And then it's lights out. Just like when parents cut the light. It went from the light and the bliss to blackness, total blackness, and a slight sense of falling. That was the only time in my NDE that I was afraid, was that bit of falling. But then I was just kind of in a black realm. I had already, as soon as they said you can't stay, I had pitched a huge fit of saying no. And I had the sense, like a little 2-year-old or 3-year-old, I'll show them they can't, you know, they can't send me back. Like I wanted to, where are the shins? I want to kick them, you know, like
So funny.
I wanted to fight, you know, and I did have a sense of the parent saying, case is closed. You know, almost thinking I was cute even in my feistiness, you know?
There's so much forgiveness, isn't there? There's so much like, oh, anything that's dark or anything that it's just like, that's just brushed aside.
Yeah, I think of it like if you were looking at a box of puppies, you know, and they are tearing up the newspaper and thinking they're so tough, or they're like stepping all over each other, not caring who they're stepping on. And like, you're not going to say, what a reprehensible being, you know?
You're just going to go, oh, that puppy.
Yeah.
Silly puppy.
It's so cute.
I know, that love. It's unusual. It's
Yeah.
just, it's in our human experience, we don't feel that at all or very often. And
For tiny harmless creatures. As soon as anything is like on our level, we're like, whoa, you know? And so for a little 2-day-old puppy, you can feel that, but that's how God feels about us.
Oh, that's beautiful. We'll have to take that out as a quote.
Well, you can't really, because there's someone in some AA book has said, we're all puppies in a box to God. But I mean, I understood that, you know?
Yeah, so you were loved that much, so you woke up in the club still, or were you in the hospital?
The transition period that I started seeing these little white stick figures like they were drawn with chalk on a blackboard. This was my transition, and they were playing these little nonsense games, going on a swing set, going on a teeter-totter, and they were just little happy figures, and they were saying these little nonsense things like, how many hippos in a flim-flam, and like these little, and I thought, well, this is nowhere near as good as the light, but this is a sort of a diversion that the parent has given me until I can go back, because I knew I was going back sometime. And so I thought, well, I'll just watch these guys for eternity, forever, for however long it takes to go back. And then one of the stick figures got closer, and the chalk circle of the face filled in like a dinner plate. And I remember feeling like, yo, dude, I can't see, you know, like everybody else. And then he started saying, how many fingers, what is your name? And then I remembered, and this is hard for people who fear death to imagine. But instead of saying like, oh, thank God I didn't die, I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. I remember this stuff. He thinks that he's a he and I'm a me, and he thinks we're like separate. And he wants me to do that trick where you like burp out sounds and it's like in a code so he can know something. And I just thought, I just don't want to do that anymore. But then he's very persistent. And so I rose to the occasion and I said, Louisa, and 3. And then I kind of had this sense of, okay, I give up. I got to do this. And as I said to you, I felt like I'd been told I have to stay in kindergarten for 50 years. You can
Yeah. When you can fly and feel great love, and then you have to come back and be stuck in time and do everything.
I hadn't really encountered another person, but because of the telepathy between me and the parent, I knew how telepathy worked, you know, and the idea of to go back to make sounds and send things, the idea, we are trapped in our bodies. We are trapped, and we have these little portals of eyes that, you know, are relaying us however much of a tenth of a second behind reality we are, you know, in our ears, and we're putting together a model of reality instead of being part of it.
Yeah, that was the beautiful part, and I totally relate. And you know I relate because you read that part of my book. You know, but yeah, that idea of coming back and just being stuck here in this body is annoying when I was that consciousness out there and flying around out there, and I was like, oh, I'm trapped inside her.
Like just now you went like this. I had a sense of he wants me to use that loaf in the garage down there. And the garage down there was my mouth, and the loaf was my tongue.
Wow.
But that's how removed I was from my body and from speech. If you've ever like been in an apartment and you're aware that there's a garage below you, that's how I felt about talking.
Wow, interesting. Interesting. So
Yeah.
So how did you integrate that? How old were you at that time when you had
I
it?
was 22.
22.
So as soon as I came to, and there was a huge crowd around me, and there was also a huge puddle of water, I had the thought that they had thrown water on me to revive me, but it was actually sweat. And I have often wondered the fact that I had ingested enough lidocaine to kill myself and then came back fine after 3 minutes of being gone. How does all that lidocaine get out of your system? So either God just said, it's gone, or God said, we'll make her sweat it out. Or I don't know, because I actually have seen other people who've died momentarily, and sweating a ton is normal. I didn't pee myself or anything because I jumped into the bathroom. But anyway, you know, we got up, and I didn't understand why everybody was staring. I didn't understand why we had to go upstairs because the nightclub had been underground. I was just, okay, I guess we're doing this. And I was 5 years old in my mind. And I've talked to other engineers who came back 5 years old also.
Yeah.
So we're sitting outside, but my need to be cool starts coming back to me. And so I light up a cigarette, and we're waiting on these benches outside the nightclub. I didn't realize, but of course, some people have called 911. We're waiting for the ambulance. The bartender, I'm so embarrassed to tell this part, but the bartender came over and he said to me, you were gone for 3 minutes. And my friend had even told him to stop doing the CPR because it wasn't doing anything. You know, it was just kind of like he just wanted to cover the corpse. He didn't want to see it anymore, you know?
Wow.
But my reaction to him was embarrassment. And I didn't like his sense that he knew me somehow, because I didn't really know him at all, you know? And then I didn't like that his mouth had been on my mouth. I was kind of like, ew. And I just felt embarrassed. And I don't know that I even said thank you. The guy that saved my life. So he's out there somewhere.
Wow.
I didn't thank him. So then I said, what are we doing? To my friend, he said, we're waiting for the ambulance. And I said, huh. And then I said, who is it for? Or I asked him, is it for me? Like I began to put this together, and then I just thought of my parents finding out I'd done cocaine. I thought of hospitals, which I hated. And I was 5 years old. So I was just like, no, I'm not going. And so my friend didn't want to you know, the whole cocaine thing was not really something he wanted to tell a whole lot of people about either. And he just said, come on. And he grabbed my hand and we ran. And there were also taxis waiting out in front of the club. We got in and we went home. So the next morning, I remembered this with perfect clarity. Perfect clarity. And I came out and told my roommate about it. We're in an apartment in Upper West Side, Manhattan. And she said that with the parents, she goes, so was that like God? And I said, yeah, I guess it was God, but I didn't feel moved by it at all. And I couldn't read the word helicopter in the newspaper, and a few other words were like Greek to me. I had a little bit of brain damage. But when I went in the room by myself, I kind of was like, either this really happened, and there's God, and there's an afterlife, and there's this just other side, or cocaine's really hallucinogenic. But nobody knows that it's hallucinogenic, and I had this huge hallucination. And maybe, you know, another option, maybe my brain was dying, and like the very last thing you come down to is like a dream of love. Like that's what I like to think, that like Hal, when they take out more and he ends up singing Daisy, Daisy. This was my Daisy song, right? So it wasn't real. So that's what we're going with, okay?
So even though you were told in that experience that this is more real than any real you've experienced, you decided that was just part of the dream and that was just part of the experience. And
yeah.
wow, I haven't actually talked to someone on this channel who chose to go, nope, nope.
Yeah. Well, how many alcoholics have you talked to?
Maybe just one. Yeah.
Because if all that were true, I couldn't keep getting drunk all the time. And I would have to change. And my whole family was atheist. I had been a big stink bomb atheist. Like my thesis was written about the death of God. Like it was just, and my shtick was there is no God. So either I have to change completely and give up the drug that I need, or I can pretend this didn't happen. And also, as a child of an alcoholic, there's a lot of things I was used to kind of shoving away and saying that didn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
So I chose that. And so that's the end of the story. And I decided, no, not really.
No.
So God had other plans.
So even though you shoved it away, did you feel moments of difference, you know, those after effects that people talk? Did you have little glimpses of them where you thought, ooh, I'm different?
I didn't.
Huh.
The first thing that happened was I was walking on a beach, still very vain, still trying to be a love addict. And the first of 14 inexplicable paranormal events happened to me. That one was seeing a ghost. I saw the ghost very clearly. He looked like a guy off of Fish Sticks. But this was in Gloucester, Massachusetts, on the beach very early in the morning. And he was as real as you are. I mean, I saw him completely, but he didn't answer my greeting. So after I passed him, I was angry, and I turned around and he wasn't there. And so I walked on a while, and I'm like, where did he go? Where did he go? Because we were the only two people on this huge beach. And so I went back, and I had the only tracks. That was 5 years after my near-death experience, okay? Then, I think 7 years after my near-death experience, I just knew that my nephew was going to die. And he was unborn. I didn't actually know that he was going to die so much as I knew my brother was going to approach this ocean of sadness. And the only time I really knew what was going to happen was the day before the birth. I knew something was going to go wrong. And I sat in my car. My brother was in the car next to me. We'd had lunch. And I just stared at my dashboard like, what can I tell him? What can I do? You know? And it was that most awful feeling. Like, I can't go knock on his window and say, roll down the window, hey, your baby's gonna die. And so when he called the next day to tell me that my nephew had died in childbirth, I had this very guilty feeling of being half sad by the news, but equally blown away by the fact that I had known it. You want to feel only grief. And I carried guilt for that until I went to my first IONS meeting and somebody pulled me aside and said, you can't tell people. There's nothing you could have done. So there are, I have a huge list of weird things that happened to me. This is the list of
Wow.
weird things. It does take a long time to tell them all. So
But
I'm going to try and kind of skip through them and keep it short.
yeah, but can you categorize them? Because when I look back, I have a lot of them too. Like there were ghosts in houses, there was, knowing a little bit of the future. So it's a lot of the after effects.
Well, what
Was it?
these are for me is that they are God chipping away at my refusal.
Oh, interesting.
So when those first two happened, I kind of just shoved them in the box also. Didn't happen, or that sure was weird, but let's not think about it. And very vaguely had the idea that they were tied to my near-death experience, but not very much. So eventually my drinking got worse and worse. And so in 1994, I drove home just completely pie-eyed. You can see quadruple. I don't know how it works at the brain level, but I was. And I was bombing along at 80 miles an hour, wanting to die. I didn't really want to live anymore. And I approached this railroad bridge where all the reflectors, because the road got narrower, I had no idea where. So I just kind of went for the middle. And I thought if I die, I die, and that's great. And I sailed through and I got home and I reached my log cabin where I was living then, kind of the opposite extreme of Manhattan. And I got out of the car. I was using the car door to hold me up, and it was a starry night. And I was thinking, man, I am such a badass when I drive drunk. And then something shot from the sky through me like lightning into the ground. And what it was my guardian angel just bellowing, just to get through this shell I had of no, don't pay attention. And it bellowed at me or shot through me. This is the last time I can help you.
Wow.
And
I just got chills.
And at the same time, kind of this after reverberation, because it's not words, it's knowings, right? You do know right from wrong. Because I had been writing all in my journal about how nothing matters, it's all bullshit, that kind of drunken thing. You do know right from wrong, and you can do better. So if we talk about there's a turd in the punch bowl, this really put a damper on my drinking. It was just not the same now that I'd heard this voice. And so it took me a month after that to really hit bottom and go to AA. But I'm still like so prideful, and I'm still trying to be atheist at the same time, right? So AA has the steps on the wall with the God stuff in it, and I'm just like, God, pew, I hate that stuff. Oh, these people talking about God and calling it he. Oh, I just hate this. But there was love in the rooms. And it was like the tiniest reverberation of what I had felt in the light. I could just kind of recognize this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, and I have a question for you because this is something I believe, whether it's, CODA or AA or, Al-Anon or whatever, anyone who goes through the steps, I think they can lead you to the same awakening as a near-death experience.
Yes, they do. They can. Because by the time you work the steps fully, you do see that love is all that matters, and that's the very same message we get, and that our job here is to love. I feel like working the steps completely will bring you to that same place of enlightenment, and people reach it in different ways. But so
And it's interesting. So you had the near-death experience, and when you worked the steps, did you kind of come full circle and go, "Oh, okay, okay"?
it takes a long time, Trish.
I know. I want to skip ahead.
I wish I could say it went fast. So that was 1995, okay? So the near-death experience had been in 1982. So I must have been a little wrong with like when my nephew died, but it's hard to keep the years straight. So I guess I can kind of speed through these. When I did get sober, and I went to Greece when I was 100 days sober, and I just had miracle, 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 miracle. Like they just came all the time. It started off with that I was just called a friend for no reason, said I'm going to be in Greece 1,000 miles away from you, you know, because she lived in oh, what's that little teeny country in the middle of Europe, starts with L, Luxembourg. So why do I call my friend that I've done all this terrible stuff to tell her I'll be 1,000 miles away? I say I'm going to be in Greece. She says, oh, I'm going to be in Greece. I say, oh, well, I get there on this day. She goes, oh, that's too bad. I need there on that day. And then I said, well, when are you going to be in the airport? We were in the airport together for like a 5-hour window.
Oh, wow.
So I got to meet with her, have lunch, and make my first amends.
Oh.
And I'm kind of like, what are the chances of that? And then all these other things aligned in Greece. So I kind of came back with a little bit of a sense of God. When my sister died in 1997, I was with her in the room, and this is what's told in Heather Dominguez's film, but how the light kept telling me she couldn't cross over. My angel kept telling me she couldn't cross over, and that I needed to tell her about the light. And so I just sat there and, what is this? What's going on with me? And I could sense the light coming in the hospital window and kind of pooling over her body. And it was like an engine revving up. They wanted to take her, but something had to happen in her before she could join them. I see it as like millions of our ancestors loving her and wanting to take her, but she was afraid, and she felt that she dying of cancer was a diss from God. That's what she told my sister. So I got up and I eventually just said to the voice, okay, I'll do it. She's not going to die for a long time, but I'll do it, you know? And so I did tell her all about the light and how well she'd done in her life, and, you know, basically told her it was time to go, and that Jesus would take her because she was a Catholic. And then I went and sat down, and then she hemorrhaged 20 minutes later and died. But I was in all this anguish and panic and trying to get people to help her. And the little doctor put a stethoscope on her and said to my brother and me, her heart's still beating, but when it runs out of oxygen, it'll stop. And I just wanted to take that little lady and like throttle her. I just want to kill her. Why aren't you saving my sister? And then my sister came to me and filled me with love. And she said, I am wonderful. And she may have been saying thank you. Like I didn't actually hear. All I heard was, I am so wonderful. I am so wonderful. I love you so much. And I could also feel that she loved the little doctor, and she loved the nurse in there who called her by the wrong name, and she loved my brother. Like I could just feel her pouring love, and she gave me the light again. Like I got to feel it again. So this was a very big one to try to stuff in the box. At the same time, I'm going to meetings and I'm hearing more and more about the steps. Shortly after this, I'm driving my car, I get to a stoplight, it turns green, and I hear with perfect clarity, don't go. And so I look in my rear view, there's no one behind me. It's night. I'm like, okay. So I just stare at the green light. And then I get this feeling I'm ridiculous. So I say, how long don't go? And then a car goes through the intersection at about 100 miles an hour, right where I would have been. Fastest I've ever seen a car go.
Wow.
So then I'm like, thank you. And I'm starting to know something's going on. To me, I just say, I have this voice, and another part of me says, can you connect that dot to your near-death experience? And I'm like, I don't know. So that happened. And then
I just have to ask a quick question. With the death and, you know, with knowing someone who was afraid to die and helping them transition, what do you say to people who you talk to, because that's one of the biggest questions that so many people who haven't had a major spiritual experience or near-death experience, they fear death. What do you say to them?
Wow. So the experience with my sister dying and with my dad dying were very different. My sister had become Catholic, and she had had a long time of battling breast cancer to know that she was going to die. And she had become kind. I wasn't even ready to jump to the level of kindness and love because we'd had a kind of a cantankerous relationship. All of a sudden, she's like, here's a olive branch, I love you, you're my sister. And I'm kind of like, whoa, that's not how we are. And so she was ready with everything but that last step of, like the trust game when you fall into people's catching arms. That was all she had to do, and everything was ready for her. Dad, by contrast, had denied his alcoholism all his life. And I knew that when he died, he was filled with regret still, of like, I was fooled every day by this thing. Every day, I said, I'm not going to drink. And every day, and so I felt like when my dad died, he still had work to do. He still had work to do. I know he went to the light, and I've talked to him since, he's great now. But death was like a life review where he felt he'd flunked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no bullshitting when you're dying. You see with absolute clarity where you let yourself and others down. And God doesn't judge us, but we judge ourselves, and really, that's no fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I talked with you about this or someone else, but my dad died an alcoholic as well. And when I felt him go into the afterlife, his life review was so long and so extensive. It was just like every little thing was analyzed. And I said, this is tedious. This is, and he's like, it's okay. I'm still supported in love. It isn't painful. It's just for my soul to see all the different ways that my life and other lives might have turned out with different choices.
Right. So with my sister, I had the sense she's free, she's full of joy and the light. With my dad, I had the sense he's really busy with a project right now.
And they get through it eventually.
Yeah. Right. So it's just kind of different. So the one that eventually turned me around is very hard to tell the story, and it seemed so anticlimactic that this would be the one that would finally make me say, it's all real. So this, I think was 2003 or 4. My son was a toddler. And I had a dream about a spider, and I was at the house where I had stayed when I first started dating my son's other mother, within a same-sex relationship. And I dreamed about this huge spider, and it was on a juniper plant, and I was terrified, but I thought, no, I can do this. So I asked my sister-in-law to give me a glass. I put the spider in the glass, or kind of, but the spider lay on, I'm going to say, her back, and showed me her belly. And in the dream, I zoomed in, and I could see these triangles of sort of gray, beige, and tan that were all interlocking and made this pattern, almost like spirograph or something, And in the dream, I thought or heard diamonds of infinite precision. Anyway, and I had the thought, wow, God is in everything, right down to the details of a spider's belly. So I was like, whoa. Tried to tell my partner that in the morning. She leaves for work. And then I am getting ready with my son, and above the place where I sit at my computer, there's this big old black ping pong ball on the ceiling. And I'm like, I don't think we should leave until we find out what the big black ping pong ball is. So I said to my son, I go in, it's the biggest freaking spider I've ever seen. I'm terrified of spiders at this point in my life. So I thought, okay, I was brave in the dream. I can be brave now. I'm like, what? So I'm like, okay. So I get the glass, I get up on a chair, the spider falls in with this huge clunk. I cover it. And I run outside in my yard, and then I go, oh no, I'm not letting this spider go in my yard. I don't want any monster spider running around my yard. So I run down the street a little bit to my neighbors, and I throw it in a juniper bush. Whoops. And the spider just lies there on her back on the juniper branch and shows me her belly. And
Wow.
there's the pattern, the diamond. Right. My brain, I can't describe, my rational brain was like, what is happening? What is happening? Parse, 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 parse. Cannot do anything. The best I could come up with was that I was in some kind of science project. So I looked around for cameras or something.
Yeah.
And there weren't any. And then I thought, okay, gotta be sure you're not dreaming. Let's look at this. Is it really the same pattern? I look, I see, I say, it's real. And the spider turns over and retracts into the plant. So then it's about, I don't know, 6 months later, I get this idea. I have to go to my friend's birthday party. I haven't seen her in years. But I decide I gotta go. It's a huge pain in the butt to bring my son with me. Nobody else has kids at this party. Like, it was so much work to get there. And then the conversation turns to clairvoyance. And I say, oh, I had this dream once. It was so silly. It was clairvoyant. And I say, tell the dream. And my friend, who's super woo, says, well, do you know about like spirit messengers? And I'm like, yeah, a little. And she's like, well, the spider, could have been your spirit messenger. I think that one like tells you when your life is going to change, like cutting the strands of the silk. And then she goes, isn't that when you broke up with your girlfriend? And I'm like, no, it wasn't. But it was when my girlfriend started seeing the other person. And so the dream had been when I first met her, and the cutoff had been when her life parted from mine. When I got home, I Googled spider messenger. It also said, are you a writer who's not writing? And I had stopped writing for this very codependent relationship because I was always taking care of her stuff. And I just bawled. And all the walls came down finally. Like, I finally, that sense of like, I am not going to fight anymore. Fuck you, rational brain. Excuse me. But you are wrong. This is truth, and everything you try to tell me is false. And I will no longer get tempted by you. And I looked at the ceiling where the spider had been, and I said, you're here. I know you're here. And I just cried. And ever since that moment in 2004, I have known with certainty that God is with me. And knowing that has let me hear my guardian angel much better. The shell that separates me, like that had to bellow the first time, my guardian angel visits me quite often now and tells me stuff. And like, I have a picture that I want to try to show you. So I got breast cancer. I was going to have an AA celebration for my 18th year sober. Then I was going to call it off because my surgery was 2 days later. Then I found out I was going to just have a lumpectomy. So I just changed the party to a get to keep my boob party. Went on Facebook, changed the name, everything like that. And so tons of friends came out. I think like 70 people in my tiny little house. So my living room's full of people, and they're all singing to me. I'm in the dining room and they're singing happy birthday to me. And I look out and I see this ocean of people singing. And, there's the cake and all like that. And I had this thought like, oh, Louisa, you are so sickening. You're just like such a narcissist. Why do you set up these situations where you're the center of attention? I hate you. And then the angel came to me. I felt it from my left, and it was like, wrong. And it said, this is the whole point of life. Just let them love you.
Aww.
And so I said, okay. And I changed and I looked at them, and now it was my job to let them love me. So this is me with one camera. Can you see what's by my head there?
There's an orb, yeah.
There's an orb. This is at the moment I am being told. This one is harder to see because a friend took it with a different camera at
Oh,
a
I
different
see it.
moment. It's moved. I see how it's different timing.
Yeah.
So the orb is moving away because it has told me what it needs to tell me, and it's going away. So
And there's a pink part to it too, almost, which
well,
symbolizes love. Or
no,
is that your hair?
it's my hair thing, but it does
Oh, okay.
have details to it. It has little orbs within the orb.
Oh, wow.
And so when you look at the other, even though the resolution isn't as good, those same things are there and it's rotating.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of, it's this energy. I don't know what it is,
That's
but
so
it's a
cool.
little one. And I know God is a huge one.
Yeah, but that's so beautiful that, you know, I'm on a lot of different websites and blogs that talk about narcissism and, you know, healing from relationships with narcissists. And one thing though that hits me is like love, and I've heard Raymond Moody talk about this and other people, that experience of that level of love is capable of healing that focus. And so many Americans, I think, are just trained to be self-focused. And, you know, like, I'm not talking about necessarily the personality disorder, but we all have levels of narcissism, and the unhealthy is the seeking attention, but the healthy is just loving yourself and letting others love you and just being in that love. And that is what God wants, is like, if you love yourself, you can love others fully. And
we have so many sayings in AA, but one of the ones that I like is that humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less.
yes, yeah,
And
yeah.
we also talk about that, like when we came in, like our eyeballs were turned inwards, like, what about me? What about me? And like when you become spiritually whole through the steps or through a near-death experience, you can turn that around and say, who are you? You know? And like, I'm okay. God's got me, so I'm okay. I don't need anything from you. But aren't you a beautiful soul? I'd like to get to know you. When I feel like that, it's almost like now I live in a very loving way because it's as close as I can get to the light.
Yes, yes. Like I write and I say that, you know, God gave me a particular mission, and teaching, you know, like from junior high to high school to college, they need so much that I was always outward focused on how can I help them, you know, even if it was just something minor. And that gave so much joy to my life that God knew that I had to do that, that was the path that I had to walk in order to be okay in this world. And I think so many people, you know, I would go home and I'd get in my victim mode, and then I'd be unhappy. And whether it's turned inward, you know, as victim, or turned inward as, oh, I need this, want this, it just leads to unhappiness. When it's turned outward, there's so much more happiness. But you do have to love the self too, and to accept love as you learned in that moment. And that's
yeah. And like in AA, I love hanging out with people in AA because we all know everyone, they've been to hell. They've been to hell, and now they're here through the power of God, right? They may not call it God, they may just call it a higher power, they may just call it, I don't know what it is. Like, people in AA have different degrees of which they're willing to sort of define their higher power. But we share that common thing of knowing whatever you call it, something has brought you back from hell. And so that there's kind of a love and a solidarity that I feel there. When I go to a near-death conference, though, it's a little different because we get that it's all about love. It's just all about love. And so, like, when I meet you, I have none of that, like, kind of like, ooh, how am I gonna, like, make her not think mean things about me?
because it's all love.
Like, hey, I don't have to worry about that. She's not gonna think mean things. You know what I mean? And so there's just this total freedom to be me and watch you being you, and it's just, oh my God, I wish life were like that. I wish everyone were like that. And I meet other people who haven't even had NDEs, like Ned, who runs the NDE thing on Facebook. He has the light. you know, and it's just getting that, no, being mean and sending little skewers to other people is not what I'm here for, you
And
know.
we feel it. And I think those of us who have gone to that place or have an energetic sensitivity, I mean, I look at people sometimes and I'm like, you think I can't feel that? You know, like that thought that you're thinking. And it's okay when I'm in charge, like in a classroom, because then I can, you know, like manipulate
Uh-huh.
this situation and get them to think differently of me because I'm in charge. But when you're just out in the world, you
Yeah.
can't necessarily change people's opinions. They just walk by you in the grocery store and their kid is sending you love and they're like, you know, like
Yeah.
in their own world. And, you know, maybe it has nothing to do with you, but they're angry about things and they send you a bad thought, like you're in my way, you know.
I read thoughts accidentally sometimes, and so one time, this I was running the writing center at University of Washington, and this girl came in and she wanted to sign up for a slot to see a tutor, and so I said, "What's your name?" And she goes, "Wendy," and I just kind of, my brain farted really big, and I just wrote Lee, and then she goes, "Why did you do that?" And I go, "I'm sorry," and I scribble it out, and she goes, "That's my last name. I was waiting to say it." And so,
Wow.
like, I answered honestly. That's all I could do was say, "Well, I must have picked up what you were thinking." And then she's like, "I've never been here in my life." And she got really mad. "How did you know my name?" And, you know, I was just like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was really embarrassed and I apologized." And she came in later for her appointment and she looked at me across the room and she was just sending daggers. Thinking, "I know you spied on me for some creepy reason."
And you're like, no, I promise.
I'm working with a client and I'll just get an idea like, oh, maybe I should have them, you know, use this particular kind of phrase at the beginning of their sentence. And then I'll say, "No, that's not what we're learning." And then they'll do it. Like this happened just once. I can't say Dale. She put this phrase in the beginning of the sentence and she turned to me and she said, "I thought just it might be nice to try doing that." And so I'm like, "Yeah, no. I didn't think it was a good idea." You know?
That's cute.
Before I did it. And then it's come up just even playing charades sometimes. I'll just know from no clues what it is. And tends to be, weirdly enough, on my left. It's from, that's where it's almost like in my energetic field, this is the thinnest place.
Interesting.
I don't know how that's, I mean, I can't back that up or anything. I can just say it kind of tends to come from the left. So I'll tell one more funny story. This is what made me go to Ions. So I knew that God was real. I knew this and everything, but I wasn't going to go meet. I just didn't feel certain enough that it was about my NDE to go to Ions. But so I went to Home Depot one time. I pulled into the parking lot, and I think of my friend Joel. And I think Joel's a carpenter. He's so nice. I bet he comes here a lot. And then I think, I really like his wife too, Wiley. They're just such a great couple. And then I think, boy, I bet their sex is still really hot. I mean, they have the two kids, but I bet like every now and then they just send the kids somewhere and it's just still on fire. And then I see Wiley naked on a bed, and I've never seen her hair up, down. It's always up in a bun, and she has it all down in her face, and she's like lying on the bed naked, looking like hella hot. And then I go, "Oh my God, what's the matter with me? I don't think of Wiley that way." And I'm like, "Lisa, I'm just really embarrassed at myself." I go into Home Depot, and then here's the thing about the spider's belly is at first I go the wrong way looking for what I want, and I kill maybe about 15 seconds going the wrong way, realizing it, coming back, go down on the main aisle where the cashiers are, and here comes Joel coming the other way. If I had not made that mistake of going down the wrong aisle, I would never have run into him. But we run into each other face to face. So I go, "Oh, Joel, hi. I was just thinking of you. How are you?" And he goes, "Oh, man, Wiley and I just sent the kids to grandma's for the weekend, and we got a bed and breakfast, and it was much needed."
Oh, so you knew.
So I wanted to say, yeah, who knew Wiley was so hot? You know? So what had happened is my friend, who I'm connected to by a little thread of love, because I do care for them, parked at the other side. We talked about it later. He was at the far side of the parking lot. thinking of his wife and the weekend they just had, and somehow I picked it up.
Wow. Isn't that
So
interesting?
after that happened, I was like, okay, there got to be something. Googled IONS, went to a meeting, and began my path of like connecting the dots of all these things and what they meant.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating, fascinating. And that some of your stories remind me of other stories too. I felt one time like I was in Groundhog Day, the movie where you keep living the same day over and over again, because I was teaching at this junior high and I would have a dream about what was going to happen the next day. And it was the same thing. I open the cabinets, I pull out the worksheets, I'm talking to my students, and I'm like, why do I know it's going to happen at this time and this way, and this student's going to say this thing? And I was just living. I was like, darn it, I'm just going to mess it up. I'm going to do something different. So I turned on the radio and I said, we're going to dance for 10 minutes. And we just did something crazy. And then we did the worksheets. But, yeah, I had to break it up.
Yeah, I do feel one of my people in the Seattle IONS said that he was shown his future as this bifurcating path. So we have multiple futures, and at each junction we do have a choice. I'm going to take this future or that future, and then that one bifurcates and so on. So I, on my last hike, was warned by my angel, you're going to fall on this particular dangerous part. I was hiking alone in the Cascades, and so they were like, you be really careful. And so I'm like, okay, I'll be careful. And the angel's like, no, you need to be really careful because this is going to suck. And so I'm like, okay. So I walked really, really slow. What happened was at a certain point, my knee gave out. If it had given out and I was in a hurry, it was really steep cirque I was going down. And so there's just a wonderful story. I'm actually trying to write it up as a story, and I tell it in one of my YouTube things of that I ended up going to a tree and asking the tree to help me because I felt like I was shy to ask God, because the whole reason that I was on this hike alone was because I had so much pride, and I was too full of ego, I felt, to pray and ask for help. And the tree answered me, each life must ask directly, meaning you need to pray for yourself. I can't help you here. And then I'm like saying, yeah, but what about this one? And all it's doing is each life must ask directly. So I tried to walk again. My knee, excruciating pain. I'm like 60 miles from one road, 60 miles from the next. I've got a beacon to call the helicopter, but I just said, can you give me some guidance? And then I downloaded all this information about what was wrong with my knee, what I needed to do to heal it. And I was told to take this little Velcro band and put it around my knee, and that God would use that, or my angel would use that as a kind of beacon for where to send the energy to heal it. And I could hike the 60 miles remaining. And I did. And I mean, I hiked crazy with a crazy heavy pack, crazy terrain, everything, and no more pain. And I went back last year to thank the tree, and she wasn't there. There were only little trees.
Wow.
So, like, as best I can figure, the angel took the form of the tree for me, knowing everything about me, and that this is the route that would take me to enough humility to ask for help. So, I mean, my sense now is that, God is everywhere, and God can do anything, and we just don't get to know why, but we're always covered. God's always got us.
This is my final question for you, and it's one I've been asked, and I wasn't offended by it, and I know you won't be either, but like skeptics sometimes ask really tough questions, and I was interviewed by this interviewer out of London, and he's interviewed, like a lot of people, and so a lot of people who are skeptics watch his program, and he said, well, I have to ask this question, did you hit your head? Is that how you had this near-death experience? And I think he was just questioning, my sanity in a sense, like how do you make sense, and how do you tell atheists who hear your story and go, okay, yes, I drank, and yes, I did drugs, and yes, I've had all these spiritual experiences, and yes, I had this denial. How do you explain the truth of the spiritual world to them?
Uh, for a little while, I lost my sense of smell. I used Zicam and it burned away my olfactory nerve, and I could no longer smell. And I have gotten it back through hard work with scents, but during the months, it was maybe like 6 months that I could not smell at all. When people would make a big deal about a scent, I began to feel like they were faking it. I began to feel like, why are you making this big? Yeah, what? There's no smell. There's nothing. You know, I remember one room I was in and people came in and said, oh my God, what is that? Oh, it's bleach? What? And I was like, it's nothing, you know? And so even though I had smelled all my life, as soon as that ability was taken away, I got just really irritated when people would talk about a smell. So I see skeptics the same way. Part of them is saying, why not me? Why don't I have this God consciousness if you have it? You know, screw you, it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
And then in my case, someone who desperately just, all I wanted was to stay an atheist. All I wanted was to hang on to my materialist view of life and go on my merry way. But I don't think I would be doing any of the good work that I do now with my blog or with my NDE talks or what all the people that I'm able to help now. God was like, we sent you back to do some stuff and you're not doing it. And so we're going to get you sober and get you God conscious so you can do stuff. Now, if I were a skeptic, if you talked to me when I was 22, when this happened, I would have said, well, aren't you just floating along on your ego there? You're so important that God talks to you. Aren't you special? Screw you, you're lying. Or you're dumb, you know?
Right.
So I really think that my heart goes out to skeptics because I think that we all have some memory of God and we all truly want to unite with that. But it's almost like the difficulty I had with letting the people love me. The skeptics are hurting children and they are afraid to trust that they are loved.
Yeah.
And they throw all this intellectual garbage out.
And that's
my answer.
That's beautifully said. And I have to add, because I think it's kind of funny, just as an end note, but I did well on standardized tests before my near-death experience. I did better after, even though there may have been some brain damage, from being dead, because I used some intuition. I knew how to go to this place, and I was like, what feels like the answer? And so IQ test and standardized tests became a little bit easier because I'd use a little bit of intuition in that process. And so those people who rely heavily on their brain, I'm like, hey, but there's intuition. There's a higher consciousness that you can tap into, even in a test.
I never thought to do that.
You can do it later.
I'll do it later.
Yeah, but what an interesting story you have. Thanks for sharing a lot of the smaller stories along the way. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I hope I didn't talk forever. Okay.
No, but I enjoyed it. And for those of you who are listening, please check out the links below to keep up with us both. But thank you very much, and may you be blessed.
Bye.